Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today we're going to do that Battle Royale. It's the comparison video of the RAL 1995 Immanis, the original HiFiMan Susvara, and the HiFiMan Susvara Unveiled, which is on my head, and will probably stay on my head through the duration of this video for protective purposes. I have reviews of all three of these out, so please see links in the description for all of those, and today we are going to do a deep dive on how they compare to each other, and my thoughts on who each one is for and why. Stay tuned right after Shameless self-promotion to hear all of that.
Hi, it's me again, 14 months later and a whole foot taller. Now, since Wave Theory liked the first 10,000 subscriber play button I made him, maybe he wants a 25,000 subscriber play button. This can only happen if you subscribe, though. Now, since over 60% of the watch time comes from unsubscribed viewers, I'm going to need you to subscribe. You can also sign up for his Patreon or send him money in PayPal. Links in the description. Now, on to the video.
Alright, this may get long because we are talking multiple thousands of dollars for all of these headphones, right? So the original Susvara was had an MSRP of $6,000 US, and actually I think that it does. The Sus Unveiled has an MSRP of $8,000 US, and the RAL here has an MSRP of somewhere between like $9,400 and $9,600 US. It seems to wiggle around in that range a little bit, but middle of the 9,000s for the basic package there. So, I mean, not cheap, right? None of these are cheap. So I'm going to take my time and try to be as thorough in my comparisons as I can be to help someone who is sitting there wondering if they need to spend between $6,000 and $10,000 US for one of these, make a good decision about which one is going to suit their music and listening tastes the best. All right. So this could get long again. I will timestamp this out, jump around as needed. See the timestamps down in the description. Okay. First, a moment for me. And let me just say that there are times when I do this job of reviewing audio gear where I just have to pinch myself to see if this is really real. And this is one of those situations because, like, both of the Susvaras were provided to me on long-term loan by HiFiMan, which is awesome. The RAL 1995 Immanis here was loaned to me by a friend of the channel. His name is Ian. Thank Ian down in the description below. And obviously, I had all three of them in my home to listen to extensively at the same time. And it's just one of those where it's just like, wow, is this really happening? And none of this could really be happening without all of you out there, the viewers, the subscribers, etc., all of those who support me in what I do. You have made this possible, so a deep and true thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I am deeply grateful for all the support I have gotten and providing the opportunities to do stuff like this, which is just really, really cool. Okay. Also, some setup here, like arguing over which one of these is the best can be a little bit of a fool's errand, right? Because we are talking about an elite performance tier for all three of these. All three of these headphones are among the best in the world. They are on the elite tier up there. And so really the question is not so much which is better than the other, because they are all wonderful in their own way. The real question here is which one is best for you. All right, and so I'm going to tell you what's best for me and why, and then I'll give some thoughts about, like, if your tastes are X, then choose one of these because of Y, okay, that kind of thing. So hopefully I've been consistent enough about my tastes and preferences in here that when I say here's what works best for me on these three and why, that can translate out and be helpful information for all of you. Really quickly here to explain how I compared all of these directly to each other. I tried to do quick switching as best I could, and there were a couple of ways that happened. Like most of the comparisons I did on my favorite personal reference chain of Roon, okay, and then lossless or high-res FLAC files, either played locally through Roon or streamed via Qobuz through Roon, or local DSD files, same difference there. Okay, or same approach there. Sonor Ultra Rendu streamer, and then direct USB into my Lampezator Baltic 3 DAC, which has had a couple different complements of tubes in it. Currently, I'm running some Valvo gold pins, which are like the same as Amprex gold pins for the 12AU7s on that one. It had a pair of 1945 new old stock Sylvania VT231 6SN7 tubes in there as the whatever the 6SN7 tubes are on that deck, and then it had the stock 5Y3 rectifier tube in it there for most of this testing. Through about the midpoint of this review cycle for the Immanis anyway, I got in Psvain. I did ask him, I'm pretty sure that's the correct pronunciation. Summit series, okay, and put those 6SN7 and swapped out the 6SN7s on there. Okay, the Amp LTA Z10E. At the time that I'm doing this filming, it was running Ray tubes, okay, a Ray Select for all of the 12AU and 12AT7 slots, and then Psvain Art Series EL84s, okay, for the power tubes on that. All right. Using the 32 ohm transformer for the Immanis, then I would use this adapter. This is a Dana Cable Lazuli Rhapsody adapter to go from XLR to 1/4 inch into the high level output, headphone output on the front of the Z10E. And then again through the 32 ohm transformer into the Immanis, and then to either of the Susvaras using either a Dana Cable Lazuli Rhapsody cable, or I also got in a Zinsonics Ballista headphone cable for review. Then also using the 8 ohm transformer box for the RAL Immanis into the speaker taps of my Z10E, and then during the review cycle here, I got in this. This is the Zinsonics C-Box 2, which I will link to. The picture on their website will look different because I got some upgraded options that make the box here a little bit bigger. I will tell you in the description what those upgraded options are. But anyway, this also, through these outputs here, presents roughly an 8 ohm load to a speaker amplifier and converts that signal to a headphone output there. And this one also has the speaker pass-through switch and option in there. So to compare the Immanis to the two Susvaras, try to do like for like as much as possible here. 8 ohm transformer from the speaker outputs of the Z10E here. So and then also this box for the Susvaras. And this allowed me to rapidly switch very quickly, because what I did is I went speaker outputs from the Z10E into the speaker input here of the Zinsonics, right? And then, because there's a switch on the front here, I did the headphone out, 0 dB attenuation. I'll explain what this is when I get to a review of this box here. Okay, the 0 dB attenuation output into the Susvaras there, and then the speaker out of this into the 8 ohm transformer of the Immanis, so forth. So then the pass-through, the speaker pass-through went to drive the Immanis, and then the 8 ohm transformer outputs on this went to drive the Susvaras, to try and be as like for like as possible. So all of the descriptions I'm about to explain in terms of the differences in the sound and all of that are they are consistent. Like whether I use the front panel headphone output of the Z10E with the 32 ohm transformer for the Immanis, or I used the 8 ohm from the speaker taps for both of those headphones, the results are consistent. It's just that the magnitude may have closed a little bit on some of the differences, because the Immanis behaves better using the 8 ohm transformer on my Z10E than it does the 32 ohm. So all of the differences that I'm about to describe here shortly are the same. It's just that the gaps narrow a bit from 8 ohm on the Immanis than they did from the 32. All right, so with that, let's start talking about these sonic differences. Okay, so let's get started here, and let's just start with kind of a 1,000-foot view. Again, real quick, what are the tunings like on all three of these headphones? And we'll just go in order of the way I want to do it. We'll start with the Susvara here, the original Susvara. Mostly neutral, hint of warmth to its sound. There is a complaint out there about it that like the 2 kilohertz region and all of that is just a little bit too recessed for some. I don't have an issue with that. I am sensitive somewhere between 1 and 3 kilohertz, and so I don't really notice the recess here. To me, this thing has really wonderful vocal timbre and so forth, but some people do think that the mid-range timbre suffers a little bit from that slight bit of a recess, but the upside of that recess is that the sound stage is nice and wide to it as well. Another complaint about the OG Susvara's sound is that sometimes it can be a little bit relaxed in the bass. Not enough punch, not enough slam, that sort of thing. To me, that is very signal chain dependent with this, because I have heard this headphone slam harder than even something like the Focal Utopia, which is renowned for its slamminess. Okay, depending on what signal chain you listen to it on. Since used units of the OG Sus are now getting below $3,000, I've done recently a couple of videos about building a signal chain for it. So talking about amps and DACs in separate videos for reasonable cost, okay, comparatively reasonable cost. So see the links down in the description for that. This has been, the OG Sus was my favorite and reference headphone because it did the most right for me the most amount of time, and prior to it I had never heard anything that was as natural or organic sounding in its timbre. Plus it's also an amp stressor, so it's great as a review tool because it will tell me how an amplifier behaves as you're pushing it to its limit in a lot of cases, and so forth there. So just a quick rundown of the Susvara, and again, like, it's worth mentioning that like the OG Sus here was first released, I think, is somewhere in the year 2017, right around in there, and it fairly quickly established itself as like the reference, even up at the top of the line, and it has really kind of warped the high-end audio market around itself, because for years the question has been, how does a new unit compare to the Susvara, or does that amplifier have the power for Susvara? Questions of that nature in a way that is not asked of other headphones to nearly the same degree. And so like it has really warped and shaped the market around itself and created a very, very high standard. Okay. We'll go Sus Unveiled because it's on my head and it was the next most recent review for me. Obviously, it's made by the same company, so HiFiMan, and it still bears the Susvara name. The tuning on the Unveiled is just a little bit different. It fills in that 2 kilohertz range a little bit more than the original does. Then the question just that becomes like, what about the bass response? Is there more or less bass to the Sus Unveiled than there is the original? And the answer is yes. And again, that comes down to signal chains here. The Sus Unveiled's bass performance is a little bit more consistent across amplifiers, I have found. So there are going to be some signal chain combinations for the Sus Unveiled where it is punchier and slammier and has a bit more rumble in the low end than the original does. Then there are going to be some signal chains where that flips a little bit, and then the original might come across as a little bit more bassy and impactful. I don't want to run through all of the examples of those because that would make this video very, very long, but just know that that is a thing that can happen. I would say just get on the HeadFi threads and ask people who have tried different combinations to look at starting places for each of those scenarios, and see my videos about driving the original Sus there. The Susvara Unveiled also is not an immediately impressive headphone. What really stood out to me with it, and go see my review for more details on this, is that like when I put it on initially and listened to it, I'm like, okay, this is nice, it is excellent, but it's not like amazing, right? It's an $8,000 headphone. It's not just like, whoa. But then I got about 2 or 3 tracks into a listening session with it multiple times and just lost myself in the music. It disappears so amazingly and so convincingly that it was just me and the music in there. And so really an amazing experience there. Something that I think you have to experience really to understand what I'm talking about. And again, because we all hear just differently enough, like, and it's tuned differently enough from these other two, it may not happen for you with this headphone and it does with the others, or it may not happen on any of them. It's just kind of an individual thing there. Okay. The RAL Immanis here is my most recent review. It is a little bit on the warmer side in its tuning. It has a bit of a perceived bass bump from about 80 to 200 hertz, right around in there. It has plenty of low bass extension to it and lots of low end rumble, like below 80 hertz and all of that. It is maybe not quite as clean in the sub bass as these other two, okay, meaning below 80 hertz. So that's a bit of a comparison. We'll flesh that out a little bit more here coming up. All right. It also has a little bit of forwardness in the upper mids, lower treble, say from about 3 to 5 kilohertz or so, that the other two do not. So this one, to my ears, has just a little bit more bite in that range. So I could be convinced that this has a very shallow V presentation to it from a perceived frequency response there as well. The sound stage on this one, though, is just like epic, huge, right? It always sounds big and grandiose in its presentation. And then also it has just a very active, lively, and exciting sound to it, where it's just a little bit more forward and energetic in its presentation than either of the Susvaras there as well. So that's just a quick rundown in terms of like what each of these sound like on their own. Let's start diving into like how they compare to each other on some of the other technicals. All right. When you get up in this price range, resolution, right? Resolution, detail retrieval. Detail retrieval is an aspect of resolution. There's more to resolution than just detail retrieval. Sometimes they get confused, but they are related. Okay. Anyway, on all three of these, you get elite levels of resolution. The Unveiled and the Immanis are just a little bit more resolving than the original Susvara. So these two have surpassed the OG Sus in terms of that technicality and the ability to resolve subtleties and all of that that are in the signal. The OG Sus is still amazing, still one of the best on the market. It's just that these two have caught it and surpassed it in that trait. Okay. But I mean, all of them excel in terms of being able to, again, extract details from the signal, and then also just subtle things. Like, they are all really, really good in their three-dimensionality and holography in their spatial presentations, which is its own separate category of performance, but resolution plays a role in that too, because to be able to be very three-dimensional and to be very holographic and all that in the spatial presentation, the headphone has to be able to resolve the subtle cues that our ears and brains pick up and interpret as spatial information. And so, like, I have never heard a fantastically three-dimensional and holographic headphone that was not also fantastically resolving. Those two very much go together, and since they are all very 3D and holographic, that also speaks to the resolution of them as well. Now, other things that are in resolution, like texturing, they are all very well textured all the way through the frequency range here. The Unveiled is the most textured and resolving in the sub bass. Okay, it's the cleanest, clearest, has the best pitch definition, and the most texturing, the most realistic texturing, below about 80 hertz. Then I would put the OG Sus, and then I would put the Immanis there. One of the weaknesses I perceived of the Immanis is just in the very, very deep sub bass. It is not as resolving, as defined, as articulated, as textured as the Susvaras below about 80 hertz. Is it still very good in all of those categories? Absolutely. Is it still an elite headphone in all of those categories? Yes. Would I have noticed that about the Immanis if I did not have these other two to immediately switch to? Maybe not. Okay. Maybe not. So that's just one of those things. Again, it's the Immanis is still really, really good. It's just not quite as strong as these other two in that particular category. Now, you get into the 80 to 120-ish or 80 to 200-ish hertz range there, bass but not sub bass. In there, then the Immanis like kind of comes forward a little bit more, where it has more dynamics and physicality in that range than these two do, save maybe the OG sus on something like an Audma Maestro HPA-1, which is just a sledgehammer of an amplifier for the OG sus. But generally speaking, the Immanis is ahead of the other two in terms of the punch through that range, and then like the texturing, the detail retrieval, the pitch definition, and all of that through that range. I would say the Immanis and the Sus Unveiled are about even with each other. They're through that range, and then the OG Sus is just a tiny smidge behind them in that range too. Now, mid-range tuning, like mid-range quality, things like tonal balance and timbre through the mid-range, I'm going to rank them Sus Unveiled the best, then the OG Sus, and then the Immanis for my hearing. I mentioned that upper, mid, lower treble bite on the Immanis. That is not horrible, but it does kind of move the timbre away from natural and organic for me more so than these other two do. They're through the mids. Your mileage may vary because you're going to perceive the mid-range differently there. So vocals and mid-range heavy instruments, which are, most of them, like, pianos, guitars, drums, trumpets, clarinets, woodwind strings, violins, just so many. Okay. And music really lives in the mid-range, right? So to me, the Sus Unveiled has the most natural and realistic mid-range tonal balance, meaning the relationships between fundamental frequencies and their harmonics is the most realistic, is the most natural, is the most lifelike of these three here. Then, again, I put the Sus Unveiled, which has just a little bit, the OG Sus, which has just a little bit less presence in that 2 kilohertz range, which can, comparatively to the Unveiled, like scoop out some vocals and make them sound just a little bit recessed and pulled back. And then, again, that upper, mid, lower treble bite for the Immanis kind of gets in the way for me because vocals and all of that sound a little bit thin, and it puts a little bit of a sheen on violins, pianos, acoustic guitars, things like that, where it just sounds like a little bit like, what would be an analogy? Edge enhancement in video, where it just gives it like this little bit of added crystalline nature that is just a little bit unnatural to my ears there. And I find that it's just a little bit too forward in that range, and the Immanis gets fatiguing for me after about 45 minutes to an hour of listening and all of that. Then I either need to take a break from it or switch to one of the Susvaras to continue listening in that session. So again, your mileage may vary on that and so forth. Okay. Treble timbre, tonality, relationships between fundamental frequencies and harmonics through the treble. Very, very hard to separate these three. They are all very, very good at that through the upper treble and into the air frequencies. And nothing really stood out to me as being like overly forward or recessed on either of the three up in that range there. Okay. If you talk about rankings, overall rankings of like dynamics and impact and liveliness, it gets a little bit fuzzier again. The Immanis just has the most lively, active, energetic, exciting sound of all of these three all of the time. Again, the sub bass issue and all of that, like the OG sus can at times and on very select signal chains challenge the bass impact of the Immanis, okay, here and there. And then Sus Unveiled has good solid bass impact. It's just not a standout feature of the sound like it can be on the like it almost always is on the Immanis and can be on the sus, the OG sus here. So again, how do you rank that? It depends. We just take my thoughts here for what they're worth. But through the mids and the treble, you get more more active, liveliness, exciting sound from the Immanis than the other two. There is an interesting feature here, though, and I think this separates the Sus Unveiled from the other two in an interesting way, and I think contributes to its lifelike nature in its sound. And that is, the Susvara Unveiled is the best among these three at doing different levels of sound intensity or different levels of loud, basically. Right? It can do microdynamics in a much more convincing way than any of these other two. Like, its ability to, like, reproduce quiet sounds while loud sounds are also happening is unmatched at this point, honestly. And it's not just that it's unmatched, it's just that it's so hyper-realistic in the way that it does it, right? And the Immanis is not bad at that, and then of course neither is the OG Sus, but just something about the Unveiled, it is magical in its ability to accurately and realistically reproduce subtle variations in sound intensity, which we perceive as loudness. And I think that really contributes, like, along with its tuning, I think it really contributes a lot to its very natural and organic sound. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about that spatial presentation ranking here. Like, if you are a soundstage fanatic, you like big soundstage Immanis, right? Very clearly, it is far and away the biggest soundstager in this group. And it's not like the soundstage on the OG Sus or the Sus Unveiled is small. In no way are they small. It's just that there's just this cavernous quality. Okay, this epic and grandiose quality to the spatial presentation of the Immanis. And that's for both good and ill, right? It always sounds that way. Whether it's supposed to or not, it just sounds big and grand and epic. Okay, so if you, again, if that's what appeals to you, this one, I don't know if there's a bigger staging headphone out there right now, honestly. Like, even some of HiFiMan's egg-shaped things, like I have the HE1000 Unveiled right here. Those egg-shaped cups on a lot of cheaper HiFiMans, right, are epic sound stagers too, just not in the way that this is. Okay, but that said, it's not like the soundstage on either of the Susvaras is tiny. It's just not what this is. I would say the Susvaras are bigger than average in their soundstage size as well. Again, just not what this is. All right. And again, all three of them, and you'd be really hard-pressed to find a meaningful difference here, all three of them are excellent at, like, the three-dimensionality, imaging, separation, depth, layering, all of that. They sound really 3D, very holographic. Separating out that part of it is difficult. Now, the size of the Immanis, the size of the soundstage of the Immanis, does make it a little bit easier, I think, to pick out separation. It sounds like there's just a little bit more space between sounds, between neighboring sounds, than on either Sus. But I think, again, that's just because the whole thing just sounds big. When you have more space to work with, now that's going to expand the perceived space in between neighboring sounds as well. Okay. The presentation of the soundstage is a little bit different, though, and in an interesting way. HiFiMans generally, and it's true of both of the Susvaras here to differing degrees, and it's also true of the Immanis. HiFiMans and the Immanis here, they present the music to you like you're kind of in the middle of a concert hall and the music is mostly out in front of you, right? And so you're kind of, again, sitting in the middle of the auditorium, and then, like, all of the presentation is, like, up on the stage. There are sounds coming from behind you, but they're mostly like reflections off the back wall and all of that if a live symphony performance is well recorded. Okay, or you're, like, in the middle of the audience in a live performance, you know, something like that. Okay. Whereas something like, you know, the house sounds from, like, Odyssey or Focal as two examples. It's like if you're at a symphony performance, it sounds like you're on the maestro's stand and you are, like, in the music, okay, with you there. Those are also, like, very holographic, three-dimensional headphone brands with most of their stuff. It's just that the way that the soundstage is presented is a little bit different. And again, the Immanis in both Susvaras is more like you're back in the audience and things are out in front of you. These two, the original Sus and the Immanis, are the most like that, where it's like you're kind of back in, like, I don't know, the 15th row or something of this concert hall, whereas the Unveiled actually pushes you a little bit closer. You're still back further away than what an Odyssey or a Focal is going to give you, but it's more like row 5. Right? So you're not like super front row, but you're not super far back away either. I think that might be that 2 kilohertz range thing going on there a little bit. That has kind of filled that out and brought you closer. The soundstage size, once you hear through that, is about the same for both Susvaras, and again, they are pretty much the same in their 3-dimensionality, holography, and all of that. It's just that the Unveiled brings you a little bit closer to the performance than the others do. It's still not in the head, it's still not out of front, it's still all out in front, it's just closer. Okay, I think that's most of it, right? Like, so a lot of it depends, and then like, let's talk signal chain sensitivity and drivability and all of that here while we're at it. None of these three are particularly easy driving headphones. These two, the Immanis and the OG Sus, are very difficult drives. The Unveiled is not quite as bad as these two, but it's not far behind on that. So you are going to want some generous amplifier power regardless of what you're doing, or regardless of which of these three you are driving here. In terms of synergy sensitivity, Immanis is probably the most sensitive, and it's also like, as I mentioned in my review video of it, when it is unhappy with its signal chain, it doesn't change its nature. Immanis is still the Immanis all the time, which is in contrast to something like a Focal Utopia or a Fostex TH900 series, where those headphones can change their perceived tuning and very much change their fundamental characters when they are unhappy. The Immanis isn't like that, but it's just that the areas that I found to be weaknesses for the Immanis, that upper, mid, lower treble bite, the deep sub-bass cleanliness, like those things in particular just kind of shift up and down, scale up and down with how happy it is with the signal chain. The OG Sus is a very, very sweet and kind headphone. It will tell you if it's unhappy with the signal chain, but it just does it in a very gentle way. So gentle, in fact, that it's often easy to miss. And you don't really realize that something is missing until it's gone. Okay, that kind of a thing. Or you switch to where it is happy, and then you're like, oh, wow, this is suddenly a lot clearer. And it never really sounds bad. So picking up that you're on a signal chain that the OG Sus is unhappy with is difficult sometimes. But again, I've made some recommendations. See links in the description for that. The Unveiled is... Or then the other thing, again, I mentioned this, is like the bass impact and sub-bass rumble can really vary on the OG Sus with amplifier power and quality in there. The Unveiled is sweeter and nicer than the Immanis, maybe not quite as sweet and as gentle as the OG Sus is. That levels of loud thing that I talked about does depend on a really high quality signal chain to also be able to bring that out. So that's something to keep in mind. The bass impact and rumble is more consistent on the Unveiled from amp to amp than it is on the OG here. Whereas again, the Immanis is always punchy and slammy. Okay. And so forth. The Unveiled is more consistent in the bass than its sibling unit. Okay. All right, so then just kind of wrapping this up, final thoughts here. My personal order of preference, and this does not have to be your order of preference, but my personal order of preference is Unveiled first, then the OG Sus, then the Immanis. These are all amazing and wonderful, and the order will be different for every person because, again, these are all great. It's just going to depend on your signal chain, your music preferences, and all that. Again, I'm a primarily rock and metal listener with some pop, some hip hops, a little bit of EDM sprinkled in there, and then also like big, loud, bombastic classical music, things like 1812 Overture, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, a lot of stuff like that, or more like, soundtracks from like Hans Zimmer or, those kinds of things. All right. And for my preferences, the Immanis can sound the most immediately impressive and engaging with those and fun, but the way it's tuned makes it fatiguing, right? And it also just, like, if you get into the really deep sub bass, like a lot of Hans Zimmer stuff does and all of that, it struggles a little bit, okay, with that in comparison to these other two. And so it also just, because of that upper mid, lower treble bite, sounds the least realistic. And I'm also a listener who I really want my music to sound natural. We hear human voices all the time. I want voices to sound convincingly real, okay? Acoustic instruments, I want them to sound like the real thing. And to my ears, it goes Unveiled, OG Sus, Immanis, in the ability to do that. They're all good at it. It's just that's the order. And then, of course, the ability to do the microdynamics, the levels of loud, okay, for the OG Sus also just brings out a realism that to my ears, these two don't have. All right. So what happens for me then, to me, the Sus Unveiled's bass is enough that I don't miss it, right? It disappears for me. It is the most disappearing and transparent headphone that I have found for my ears, for my music tastes, period. Okay. And so that to me makes it sonically the biggest draw. Okay. Then the OG Sus, then the Immanis. Now, the trick with the Susvara Unveiled here is, the naked drivers, right? And I talked about this in my review video. Some people are going to turn it down just because they're too nervous about this, and I get it. I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong on that. The Immanis here is the heaviest of these three. So, I mean, there's also the comfort issue of like, can your neck support this for a long time? Some people are sensitive to that, and so forth there. Honestly, the headphone with the fewest ergonomic and comfort drawbacks in this grouping is the Sus Unveiled. Okay. Like it's really good there. And also, I know some people are concerned about HiFiMan build quality and all that, but I mean, this model dates back to 2017, and how many stories have you heard about it falling apart? Like, not many, right? Its design holds up, okay, over time. We'll see what happens with these two, okay, on that as well. Okay, so, yeah, if it were my money and for my taste and all that, I would go Unveiled, then the OG Sus, then the Immanis, and just, you got to be careful with this, but the sound to me is worth the trade-off, but you are free to come to a different conclusion on that, and you will get no grief from me if you do. All right, so, I mean, that's it. Those are my preferences. I hope that they help you. I'll add here that, like, to me, the Immanis is more like, as long as you're not into, listening to a lot of music that digs really, really, really deep, and maybe you have just a little bit of hearing loss, or you just have an ear canal shape or something like that, that you don't really perceive that upper, mid, lower treble bite, then this one is going to be really, really hard to beat, right? It's just amazing and impressive all the time. But the thing is like, it's not a get out of the way headphone to me like the Sus Unveiled is. It's like, you're always going to get the Ral Immanis take on whatever you're listening to. Okay, if that works for you, great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't, right? And then in the middle there is just like, we've got the good old trustworthy Susvara. And the exciting thing about the OG Susvara right now is that used units, it can be difficult to pick up. Used units are getting cheaper. Right, they're starting to go for under $3,000 used now, and so to get this for that price is like one of the best deals going in hi-fi right now. Okay, so that's incredible. All right, so yeah, there you go. Who are you? And what are you looking for? You need to know that if you're going to spend this much money. All three of these headphones are good across a wide range of musical genres. I just found the Immanis to be a little bit fatiguing for me too quickly. The other two, I can throw any kind of music at them that I want, and they at least sound good, and so forth. So take that for what it's worth there. I guess I'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thanks for watching. I'm Wave Theory. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment. I hope this has been helpful to you in comparing really what are the best headphones in the world right now that, aren't the crazy ones like Shangri-La or HE1 or Aperio, those kinds of things. These are all amazing, okay? They are all really amazing, and hopefully I can help you pick the one that is right for you. Okay, enjoy the music, everyone.